So everybody, welcome back. So we have kind of a special presentation for everyone today. We've got a lot of significant names that are on this call from all over the world. We're all in different time zones right now. And today's going to be all about duty-free apparel sourcing in East Africa. So for everyone out there, whether you are a new buyer, a small to medium buyer, or you're an enterprise level corporate buyer, there's lots of alternatives to Asia out there, and East Africa is one of the regions in the world that is catching a lot of attention from major brands and retailers. And today we're going to be learning why that's the case and why a lot of sourcing is shifting to Africa. So we've got several speakers today, and I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Margaret Waithaka, who is the Program Director for USAID in East Africa. So Margaret, please go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I don't know what time zone it is in your area, but welcome to this wonderful webinar. Our theme for today is duty-free apparel sourcing from East Africa. And East Africa covers a lot of countries. And together we are going to focus on the countries that the USAID Southern Africa Trade Hub project is working on. And before I go too far, I'd love to introduce our wonderful panel. And I'll just go through them one by one. First of all, we have Steve Lamarr. Steve Lamarr is the President and CEO of the American Apparel and Footwear Association. Welcome, Steve. Secondly, we have Jaswinda Bedi. Jaswinda is the Chair of the Kenya Export Promotion and Branding Agency. She should be joining us. Next, we have Andres Saldias. Andres is a colleague of ours at the USA Trade Hub. Andres is an apparel, marketing, and linkage consultant. We also have Ato Goshu Nagash. Ato Goshu is the president of the Ethiopian Textile and Garment Exporters Association, or also known as ETGAMA for short. And then we also have Pankaj Bedi. Last but not least, Pankaj Bedi. He's the chairman of United Apparel EPZ Company Limited in Nairobi, and he'll be talking to us more. So that's the panel that we have. I don't know if I've missed anybody out, but I believe we should be able to hear from them very soon. So I will just talk a little bit about why we are having this webinar. And we'll also talk a little bit about what East Africa can do for you, because many of you may not know East Africa. So we're going to introduce East Africa to you, and we'll explain why you should consider East Africa as your next major apparel sourcing destination. So the objective of our webinar today is basically to share information about East Africa. And this is coinciding obviously with the online sourcing at Magic virtual trade event, which is taking place between the 15th of September and the 15th of December. And I hope all of you will take the opportunity to visit the Magic show and look at all the displays available, but particularly pay attention to East Africa, and I'll share the companies that are exhibiting under our booths. USA Trade Hub is where we work, so I'll share information about that. I'll share briefly information about AGOA benefits and how US buyers like yourselves can take advantage of duty-free sourcing. We'll look at the capacity of East Africa's apparel and PPE industry. We'll also hear the perspectives of the US apparel industry and sourcing from East Africa. US brands have been sourcing for many years, over 30 years, and they have long experience. We'll hear a perspective from that. We'll also hear about the positioning of two East African countries who are exporters as they seek to address US buyers' needs. That's Kenya and Ethiopia. And last but not least, we'll also hear from an experienced East African exporter who has been successfully using AGOA to serve the US buyers and his customers. Yes. I'm going to talk about a little bit about what the USAID Trade Hub does. The USAID Trade Hub is a short name for the USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub. This is a 5-year trade and investment project sponsored by USAID, obviously, but working in Southern Africa. It's intended to increase global competitiveness, intra-regional trade, and improve food security in Southern Africa. And it partners across Southern Africa to ensure sustainable economic growth, increase global competitiveness, and grow trade in targeted Southern African countries. And the Trade Hub has been working to increase exports to the US under AGOA, has been boosting capital and technology flows, and has been working to provide targeted trade facilitation support. But we are not from Southern Africa as such, we're actually from East Africa. So why are we involved in this? Well, basically the USAID missions in Southern Africa and the USAID missions in East Africa have collaborated to put up a project or an activity. We're calling it the East Africa Trade Promotion and AGOA activity. And it covers 5 East African countries, Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Uganda. And it's over 18 months. And our basic mandate is to promote two-way trade between the US and East Africa, both trade and investment. And this is primarily under the US government's Prosper Africa initiative. We will focus on expanding exports to the US under AGOA, hence this webinar. We'll also be helping to support export of technology and investment capital from the US to East Africa to meet East African enterprises' technology and capacity needs. We'll also be looking at facilitating reduction in barriers to trade within East Africa. What activities have we been undertaking? We are doing quite a bit of end market studies for the targeted products. We've been helping to coach companies to engage with the US market. We've been helping to link US buyers to East African exporters, and hence why we are involved in MAGIC this year. We've also been linking US associations, trade associations with East Africa trade associations. And last but not least, we've been working on regional trade policy analysis and review. One of the sectors we work in amongst the 5 is apparel and PPE, and that's the focus of today's event. What is AGOA? AGOA is an acronym for the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. This is a US trade law, which was passed in year 2000, and it provides duty-free access to the US market for over 6,400 products. The USAID Trade Act of year 2000 provided additional duty-free access to products which were previously ineligible under the old Generalized Systems of Preference, or GSP. And this allowed eligible sub-Saharan African countries to start selling a whole range of products, but significantly we were allowed now to sell apparel. AGOA has been renewed twice for 5 years, that's in 2005 and 2010, but in 2015, it was extended for a further 10-year period up to 2025. AGOA essentially provides duty-free, quota-free treatment for eligible apparel articles, which are going to be exported to the US until the expiry of AGOA in September 2025. The AGOA eligible countries, such as the ones we've represented here, must establish a textile and apparel visa system. Just like when you travel to a country where maybe you don't have residence, many times you're asked to obtain a visa, and in a similar manner, the goods which leave an eligible sub-Saharan African country for the US under AGOA, in order for them to enjoy duty-free access to the US market and to be passed by the US Customs and Border Protection Group, then they must have a visa, which will accompany the export documentation, such as the commercial invoice, the packing list. The export documentation must also include an AGOA visa, which is stamped into the documents and is provided by the designated customs authority or any other agent allowed by the US government to issue the visa. If you look at the AGOA benefits, as I've said, it provides duty-free, quota-free access to the US market for apparel articles under the special provisions. And we have 2 types of provision. We have, first of all, what you call regional fabric. This is where the fabric is obtained either from accumulation of value from the eligible countries in Africa, or a combination of African and US fabric. In addition, there's a category, we call category 5, which caters for third country fabric. That is, you can use fabric from a non-AGOA eligible country and non-US source. You can stitch it, finish it, pack it, and export it to the US, and it will enjoy duty-free preference. And this is very important for the US buyers to understand those particular rules, so that you can engage more constructively with your potential vendor. The collective limit for all the sub-Saharan African countries is for total product is 7% of the total apparel imported into the US in the previous year. And in this case, if it's third country fabric, it's about 3.5% of the value of all the apparel imported into the US. And I must say, we've never actually reached the full value of that cap. So there's still plenty of room for additional sourcing by US brands. Basically, in terms of exports over the last 4 years, that's from calendar year 2016 to calendar year 2019. The countries represented in our program, that is Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda. Uganda. They sold a cumulative total value by last year, financial year 2019, of 711.9 US dollars worth of apparel. That's under AGOA. If you take the total sales, some of them did not claim AGOA benefits, it's in the order of 717 million. And if you compare that with calendar year 2016, where it was only 409.7 million, there's an increase of about 74% over the last 4 years. So there's been a big jump, particularly last year, in the value of exports from East Africa. I'm going to just summarize now and say, even under COVID conditions, we've compared the volume of apparel sold from East Africa to the US in the first 7 months. That's from January to July. And we are working at 89% of last year's volume. So yes, there's been a dip because of Corona or COVID, but I think the companies and the enterprises have given a good account of themselves. And thank you, the US buyers have continued to source. So we hope we'll get back up to where we should be, and we'll be able to grow the figures to much higher levels. So we'd like to invite all the apparel buyers to explore sourcing at Magic. And we have 4 companies showing at that show. We have Africa Apparels, Shona EPZ, both from Kenya, Desta PLC from Ethiopia, last but not least, United Aryan EPZ, and their director and chairman is here. We'd like to invite everybody to engage with us, and at the end, we'll be able to share our contact details. So with that, I would like to welcome all the other speakers who are going to give their panel presentations. And thank you very much for the opportunity. And we hope that we will be able to engage further and expand your duty-free sourcing of apparel from East Africa. Thank you very much. I'll hand over now back to you, Chase, and you hand over the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Of course, Margaret. Yes, thank you very much. So next, we're going to be going over to Stephen Lamarr, who is the president and CEO of the American Apparel and Footwear Association. So for many of you out there that are going to be seeing this, if you are not members of the AFA, I would absolutely recommend your company to go through the process to get up and running within the AAFA community. So Stephen is going to be going over some of the details and benefits of their organization. But applying everything to the conversation here today, we're going to be hearing his perspective of the U.S. buyer's perspective of what it's like sourcing in East Africa and some of the benefits his members are seeing. So Stephen, please go ahead.
Great. Thanks, Chase, for inviting me to speak. Thanks, Margaret. And Chase, I would echo your comments about, I think everyone should join AFA. We have a slogan that you're either a current member or a future member. So if you're a current member, thank you. And if you're a future member, we look forward for you joining the family. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are when you're watching this. For those of you who don't know, the American Apparel and Footwear Association is a trade association. We're based in Washington, D.C. Our role is to advocate and educate the industry. We provide a number of ways in which we do that, either direct lobbying or a number of conferences and events where we communicate with the industry, either information, best practices, stuff that we want the government to take on, whether it's the U.S. government or international governments, or else to take that information back to the members so they can help make smart decisions based on either actual or anticipated government actions. We build our work really around 3 pillars: brand protection, supply chain and manufacturing and trade, And it's that focus on trade and supply chain, and actually specifically on Africa, that we're going to talk about today. So Africa's long been important for our membership and our industry. Personally, actually, it's been an important part of my life. I actually was a Peace Corps volunteer in Botswana in Southern Africa in the 80s, and then spent a good chunk of the 90s working on U.S. Trade policies with a focus on East Africa, and spent a lot of time, for example, with Kenya and Tanzania, and actually, in fact, worked at the Commerce Department for a couple of years as the one of the Africa desk officers. With AAFA, the work has, I think a lot of it's really focused around AGOA. We were part of the original grant of AGOA back in 2000, and have been active on all of the AGOA renewals that have occurred, either tweaks and either modifications to the provisions. And of course, the big one in 2015, which provided, as Margaret mentioned, that 10-year renewal, that very, very important 10-year renewal for both the underlying program as well as the state-of-the-art third country fabric provisions, which have really been an important part of the sustained growth of imports from Africa to the United States since 2025. I would remind everybody, of course, that even though the expiration is not for 5 years, the expiration is actually 5 years and a day. It expires 5 years from tomorrow. And that expiration deadline is coming up on us. And so it's something that we need to pay attention to. I'll talk about that in a second. One of the things I think that to really kind of focus on now is the impact of COVID on our industry over the last 6 months. We can really look back a couple of years, and we can talk about some of the supply chain changes and challenges. And a lot of those changes and challenges have really been concentrated and in many cases intensified and accelerated as a result of what we saw with COVID. So let's just set the table for a second. COVID, we witnessed repeating demand shocks and repeating supply chain shocks. So a supply chain shock in the sense that a country was shut down, and obviously the first one was China. And so production couldn't move out of those countries. And then that supply chain shock morphed as countries that are dependent on China for their supply of, say, raw materials, they began to shut down. So even though the factories themselves weren't closed, the inputs that were coming in were beginning to dry up. So those factories were beginning to have a harder time producing. Then as that was, I won't say normalizing, but as that was starting to attenuate a little bit, then these massive demand shocks, unprecedented, as retailers across the world, many countries across the world, the United States and Europe principally, began to shut down for extended periods of time, which then forced massive liquidity problems throughout these supply chains. And then as COVID was continuing to spread, that then accelerated the supply chain shocks. So you had these kind of waves of supply chain shocks and demand shocks that was battering the globe and battering the industry. So this very, very critical health crisis became a very, very critical economic crisis, and has continued to have these knock-on effects since then. There's really been two big trends, I think, that have kind of emerged or intensified as a result of that. One is the diversification out of China. Now, everyone in the industry has been talking about diversification out of China for years. A couple of years ago, that talk started to become more action oriented as people were trying to move their finished product production out of China to escape the tariffs as a result of the trade war between the U.S. and China. But then what we've begun to see is in addition to that trend accelerating, wow, I really need to move my product out because obviously tensions between the U.S. and China continue to deteriorate, largely fueled by election year politics, but maybe a larger shift in attitudes as well. Folks are now looking at, maybe we need to diversify not just the finished product, but the materials. So where are my tier 2, tier 3 suppliers coming from? Where am I getting my fabrics? Where am I getting my yarn? And so more and more companies are looking to diversify that as well. Now, we're not talking about diversification of product that you're making in China for consumption in China, that local for local. No one's really talking about that. We're more talking about diversification of product out of China or supply chains out of China that might be destined for other markets, say the United States or Europe, or maybe even other markets in Asia. And one of the reasons why this is so important, so whether you're trying to move your production out of China from the purposes of having diversification of the end product or the finished product, a lot of people are looking at Africa. One of the things, though, just to keep in mind, and I'm gonna hammer on this point a couple of times, is that even if you're producing that product, say in Ethiopia, which is one of the great success stories, or Kenya, also a good success story, is that if your inputs, and again, remember we have this third country fabric provision in AGOA, if your inputs are coming from China, then you still have that risk of your production in China, either because if we have a future shock to the system like we have now, or one of the other issues that everyone's working to address is the very real problem of forced labor in the Xinjiang region in China. There's a lot of enforcement and regulatory action that's being contemplated or has been enacted already that's going to make it increasingly difficult to produce product anywhere in the world that uses inputs that originate from that region. And even if you are producing a product, say in Kenya or Ethiopia, but if your products originate, if your yarns and fabrics originate in that region, even if your yarns and fabrics are produced locally, but the cotton originates in that region, that could be an indication that you have, that you may have some forced labor that's tainting the supply chain, and increasingly companies are going to have to be able to document that they don't have that, or that they've done the diligence to make sure that they've taken every step to make sure that's not going to happen there. So I just stress that because as we're looking at diversification out of China, it is diversification really of all the supply chains. That's really where folks are looking at. The other big trend, I think, that, or the big sort of lesson that we learned coming out of COVID so far, and again, COVID is still ravaging the globe, so we have the ability to learn more lessons perhaps, is the fragility of supply chains, is that we need to rethink how supply chains are. Our supply chains as resilient as we thought they might be? And in many cases they are, but not in every case. You know, we found that that just-in-time model, or a model where your production is stretching out across a number of different countries, if there's a break in any of those links, your entire supply chain is paralyzed. And so companies are now looking at, okay, how can we make our supply chains be more vertical, more regional, more sustainable, more nimble, and maybe even more proximate to the end consumer. And when I talk about proximity and nimbleness, it's both a function of geography, but also a function of time. Increasingly, consumers want to buy their product quickly. They want to have access to it very quickly. And so what companies are finding is the closer they can get their supply chain to their end consumer, that local for local model that we talked about before, the more likely it is they'll be successful. And of course, as a lot more retail has gone into the e-commerce model, we're seeing that as well. So what does this mean for Africa? It actually means quite a lot for Africa. As we are seeing these disruptions and dislocations of supply chains, companies are looking around the world, revisiting places that they had visited before but had decided they're not going to do business with, looking long-term at areas of the world where they think they can develop more opportunities. And when I talk to my members, Africa tends to be at or near the top of the list for just about all of them. Now, for some of them, it's more of a medium to longer term. For some of them, it's more of a shorter term. You know, I'm going to place some test orders now, see how it works, and then if that works well, then I want to kind of continue to ramp up and I want to continue to grow that. For others, they're looking at the model that we saw in Ethiopia, which was the development of sort of from the ground up of local textile production, local apparel production, and sort of bringing that vertical supply chain to life in a sustainable manner right away. And, can we recreate that either in parts of East Africa or other parts of the continent? I know we're not talking about West Africa, but a lot of folks are talking about West Africa and Southern Africa as well. So I think as companies are starting to look at the continent, they're starting to see pockets of opportunity. One of the things that folks tell me, though, is while duty-free is important, it's not the be-all and end-all. It is absolutely critical, and it is something that is a vote in favor, but it's not the be-all and end-all of sourcing. There's really a lot of things that you have to get right. It's that private sector government partnership that has to get right. It's the infrastructure. You have to have that certainty. You have to be based on the rule of law. Obviously, a very, very strict, no compromise approach to worker rights, human rights, making sure that these partners, these factories that we're doing business with are really strong, viable, sustainable partners. They share our values going forward. And so that's very big. But the duty piece is important. And so when we look at the duty piece, we look at it and we say, geez, this duty program is going to expire in 5 years and 1 day. That's the blink of an eyeball. And while that's enough time to continue to support existing trade and to lure in new orders, that doesn't lure in new investment. And the reason why is because new investment, if we're looking at investment in yarns and fabrics, and that's really the investment that we're talking about. If we're looking at investments in yarns and fabrics, that return on investment, that's a period that extends beyond 5 years. We look at that as 7 years, 8, 10 years, maybe even longer than 10 years, depending upon the complications of that particular supply chain. And if you really want to do it right, make it sustainable from the ground up, you're looking at that long-term period. So that's one of the reasons why AFA has been leading an effort. We just launched it a couple of months ago to secure now, and by now I mean within the next year or so, but to secure now a long-term renewal of AGOA. We don't want to wait until 2025 and get it renewed then. By then, we will have missed out on 5 years of investment. We want to get it renewed now so that we'll have that long period, the 5 years now, plus another 10 years on top of that, 15 years, if you can imagine that, 15 years of an investment runway, which will be really important to promote not just the new orders, but actually the underlying new business that can spring up from having a vertical and sustainable supply chain. This won't be easy. It will require an act of Congress in the United States, and you have to remember our Congress likes to do things at the very end. And to give you an illustration of how they like to do things at the very end, many of you know about the Caribbean Basin Trade Partnership Act, which is primarily a trade program that's focused on Haiti right now. It was actually enacted. The very first time it was enacted was during the original enactment of AGOA a little bit more than 20 years ago. The Cbtpa, Caribbean Basin Trade Partnership Act, actually expires tomorrow. And there is an effort to do a 10-year renewal of the Cbtpa. It passed the House last week. It hopefully will pass the Senate today, September 29th. And hopefully will be signed into law by the president tomorrow, September 30th. But talk about waiting until the very last minute to do things. We don't want that to be Africa's fate. We want AGOA to get renewed much earlier, so we have that investment certainty. The other challenge to it, not only is, again, Congress putting things off until the last minute, is we have a free trade agreement agenda with Africa. The Trump administration has launched one. They've been talking about it for a number of years. We've actually launched a specific agreement with Kenya. AFA is very, very supportive of that agreement, and we look forward to working with our Kenyan friends to see that come to fruition as soon as possible. But there's a creative tension in Washington between extending AGOA and FTAs, and the feeling is that if you have an FTA, if you have an extension of AGOA, then maybe that's a disincentive to use the FTAs. or to negotiate FTAs. So while we're promoting a renewal of AGOA, we're going to promote a renewal in such a way that it creates incentives to do those free trade agreements, which are longer term, i.e. permanent, reciprocal, cover a much larger array of products. And hopefully we'll have the rules of origin that we need to sustain that long-term investment. So the bottom line is we need to renew AGOA, we need to be negotiating FTAs, and we need a policy that marries those two, the AGOA and then the FTA policy, so that we can transform the U.S.-Africa trade partnership into something that's more permanent, more certain, and conducive of both trade and investment. So I'm going to stop there, and there'll probably be some questions at the end, but I'll turn it back over to you, Chase. Thanks.
Sure. Yes, and I was just taking some notes here as you were speaking, and in terms of local for local, and the fragility of the supply chain, and how companies are making their supply chains more nimble and so forth, and applying this to your members and other peers of yours in the industry. I'm curious for those that you may know of any case studies that have begun to start sourcing in Africa. Specifically to East Africa for this conversation, but I guess what they've done. I'm wondering if there's maybe 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 steps of I guess I would say do this, don't do that. If there's any things that you would suggest for everyone who's going to be seeing this when they're switching gears over to Africa, what some of those key things to keep in mind when they're shifting over to African suppliers.
I would say there's 2 things just in general that you want to do. One is wherever you're going, you need to have the factory partner, whoever the entity that's going to be producing your product, and really all of the entities in that supply chain. So the mills, the logistics companies as well. You need to have them fully vetted. They need to be your partners, because you want to be able to rely on them like you rely on yourself, right? So this is, they're an extension of who you are. And increasingly my companies talk about that, especially in as we've emerged from some of the COVID shocks, because it's clear. And again, if you even look at it from the lens of the factories and the supply chain partners, they want to know who they're doing business with. They want to know that their product will be paid for, right? They want to know that they're going to have that certainty as well. And there's this mutual dependency that is absolutely critical. And so before you go in, you really need to understand, is this a partner? Is this a company that I can do business with? Do they share all of my values? Are they going to be part of my DNA in effect? And then the second thing is, what is the commitment by the government? Is the government also a partner? Are they interested in making sure that, are they going to enforce the law? Are they going to make sure that problems don't emerge? Are they going to make sure that as I'm doing business in that country, that if I do encounter any difficulties, is there somebody I can go to and say, this isn't what we were talking about when we came in? Is there a way we can kind of fix and address this? Will there be actions taken 3, 4, 5 years from now that will continue to support that shared vision that we have right now, as we're beginning to make that investment, or beginning to make those new trade provisions? And again, we see this around the world, where Haiti's another good example, where we're running into situations where that government is taking steps that is undermining the very investment that's there right now. And that's just top of mind because it's literally happening, it's literally in my inbox right now. We've seen that in other countries too. So is the factory partner a solid partner? And again, and I would invite the factory partners to make sure that they're doing that diligence back with the brand or retailer that's buying from them. So is that relationship solid and strong? And is there a good government partnership as well, where there's shared expectations for growth and prosperity going forward?
I like that. Always keeping in mind the overlap of the private and public sector whenever companies are identifying countries to source from. So
absolutely critical.
And this actually transitions perfectly over to our next speaker here. So Andres Saldias, who is the apparel market linkage consultant here. And I'm actually going to go ahead and make you the host because Andres will be giving a little presentation for us as well. And for everyone out there that'll be seeing this, of course, you'll be able to get in contact with all the speakers that are here today. But with Andres, I've known him for a couple of years now, and I like to consider him like a liaison. And everyone on this call is a liaison to a certain capacity. But for those who are looking to have sort of a directory or a buffet, if you will, of all these different suppliers that you could be sourcing from throughout East Africa, Andres is going to be one of your go-to people to know. So if you're looking for several different factory partners, Andres is going to be one of the people that you'll want to have in your Rolodex. So Andres, that's my little introduction for you. So if you want to go ahead and please maybe share a little bit about yourself before you dive in.
Thank you so much, Chase, and thank you, Steve, for those enlightening words about what's the situation for the industry. My name is Andres Saldias. I've been involved with the African continent for the last, going to the 4th year, working with a hub. My main function is to link buyers and sellers in a glance. I've been visiting for that purpose at about 90 factories, and with virtual factories visiting recently, probably I have seen a very close over 100 factories, and we were able as project to identify which factories have all the conditions that Steve was mentioning, concepts like vertical integration, logistics, transparency, speed to market, and I was happily surprised to see so many actors and firms that have all share this vision to reach the U.S. market. So my presentation will be strictly from a business approach, and the best way to explain and to show what's out there in East Africa is through my personal pictures of my visits. I'm not going to show anything from the internet. I'm just going to share my personal experiences on what did I see, what I found in these countries, and what I call a value chain proposition. Okay, any buyer will look for key factors before they can start sourcing with a new vendor or factory. Raw materials availability for sure. This is 40% of the cost, as Steve mentioned. This is a key factor in the global supply chain. Technology to transform those materials into fabric in compliance with the specification. The production know-how, which is mainly how well established are the factories in terms of productivity, efficiency, and that will create in some terms the trust from the buyers to buy from them. This is a business, and the buyers are looking for long-lasting partners that will be handling their business, and that's what I call the trust from the buyers. And of course, if these factories can comply with corporate social responsibility and vendor compliance. So from the beginning, raw materials. It's a picture of me in Tanzania. I'm holding a big package of lint, raw cotton, and I say, hey, I found the gold, because cotton is the gold. Countries that have this raw material and can transform that into quality fabric, they have the opportunity. I saw that in multiple countries, mainly in Tanzania. I saw that also in Uganda, that has one of the better cottons around the world, equiparable to the Egyptian cotton qualities. And not only that, but the technologies to process and produce that in multiple kind of fabrics. I mean, denim, knits, woven, and some pictures of factories in Mauritius, in Madagascar, in Tanzania, showing state-of-the-art technologies to process that under specification. You can see here on the left, you know, an automatic kitchen lab. That piece is probably about $500,000 itself. And what it does is basically supplies the color and chemicals to reach the proper color matching and make sure the spectrophotometer is going to be enlightening and passing the lab dips and the color standards. The knitting process are impeccable in terms of isolation, in terms of moisture, making sure that the factory is being produced under specification in all terms, meaning color fastness, shrinkage, NEPs, and so on and so forth. Going to the production know-how, this is probably the most important portion that Africa needs to offer. Ideally, in the long term, like Steve said, having a longer vision, the first stages of the chain, which is the spinning, the knitting, the dyeing of fabrics, will come into more action in Africa. I've seen there, but I see a huge potential. And what's the next step on the chain? It's the cut and sew. And there, Africa has an amazing capabilities, from automatic cutters, efficiency reaching 85, 90%, cleanliness of the factories, productivity that you can see in Ethiopia, Kenya, and some pictures that I took personally when I was visiting, again, Africa. This is the best way to share my experience of my visits. You can see here an auto laser sanding machine on the denim industry. You can see automated factories that are giving you digitized information about production flow, efficiency per line, per worker. So factories really are up to speed on managing information that at the end is so important for the buyer, because they want to know what's the productivity, where the POs are, and those technologies are in several of the factories there. That goes to what is the results, okay? And that's what I call the trust. So whenever I've been talking to over probably 150 potential buyers, and the main question is, what does Africa have to offer me? Why should I trust my business to them? And the best answer I can give you is with real life examples of brands that are already in the region, like Calvin Klein, Tommy Hilfiger, Nautica, the Children Place. They are already doing a major business there, and they had to go through all that, the whole 9 years in the process, from samples development until factory compliances, before, of course, they can allocate these orders. But as you can see, that's already in the works. It's in production. Kohl's, Walmart's, and several brands are already sourcing in Africa as an alternative, as an option to the Far East. And then the other concern from buyers, do they share the U.S. market beliefs? Do they have a corporate social responsibility attitudes and management skills? And the answer is yes. You can see canteens that they provide daily meals to the workers, the spare time with soccer fields, education to kids to teach them about hygiene, supporting sports clubs, and providing transportation. You can see in that canteen in the center in Kenya, it's very inspiring to have in the wall the pictures of Kenyan racers. As you know, they are one of the world's leading racist marathon racers in the world, and they put those pictures, this racers picture, because they say we are the number one in the world, and we're going to be the number one. So those are the kind of sentimentals they are putting in the people. You can see daycares and medical and boxes to give feedback to the management. Definitely, this is very well established in these factories, meaning that the human factor is the more important asset. So this is what I call the value chain. What are the factors? And I do agree with Steve. It's not only AGOA. AGOA is an important portion and it has an impact on the price, of course. 17 to 32%, of course, is a big impact. But there are multiple other elements that go in the buyer's mind before they can allocate their production to any East African factory. And that's what I call the value chain proposition. Why they are a real alternative to competitors? Number one, because they can provide collaborative sourcing. What is that mainly? Become a partner more than a vendor. A partner on developing products, on trying to find alternative on fabric supply, even though Africa is not yet considered a vertically integrated region. There is several factories already doing that. There is several buyers already buying local fabric. That means that they have already passed all the QC standards to be suppliers of fabric. But nevertheless, they are also using fabric from other continents around the world. Speed to market, that's another big factor. That's also related not only to the sewing, but mainly on the transportation time and the business cycle since you get the fabric, and there are multiple ways to work around that, is including warehousing the fabric for stock on great fabric, or on ideally, I was just talking yesterday with another factory that has a lack of orders, but they have amazing capabilities of woven and knits. You know, that's a sleeping factory right there that needs to be exploited. Competitive pricing is not only related to skilled labor, it's so many factors around there: productivity, just-in-time deliveries, and transparency, which means due to the COVID situation at this point, buyers are interested in learning and having a clear and transparent information throughout the production process. This is related to technologies of automation, digitation, so the buyers can have actual understanding where the purchase orders are. So all these factors are already in the mindset and already implemented in several of the factories I've visited. And this explains why the growth. If we see the growth from 2016 to 19, from 32 million to an exponential growth of 207 million. Kenya from 339 to 452. Rwanda, Uganda still unexplored, especially Uganda, as they have the cotton, but it's still an unexplored area, and there is a lot of opportunities there. Again, it's a huge cotton producer that can become a huge hub for production and supply chain. Tanzania reaching 51 million, and overall the region, just on these countries, have increased from 409 million to 711 million dollars in exports, in apparel exports to the US market. So this growth shows what I was just disclosing. There is a value chain, there is a proposal. There are factories, there are vendors already doing this sourcing process, and our project has been very keen on supporting this for the last 3 years. We were able to bring 7 US large buyers to the region, commencing operations. We were able to provide over 120 business-to-business linkages. We have over 30 the buyers' missions to the US market, backward missions of factory owners visiting the US headquarters here in the US. And that's the opportunity we see. At this moment that according to a recent survey from Gartner over the leaders in the industry, in the US industry, the outcome was quite interesting. 33% answered that they want to source out of Africa by 2025. So here it is. This is the proposal. Buyers, please start looking the African continent as a reliable partners. They have the conditions, and they're eager to provide what the industry requires, which is not just a product. It's a service. It's a collaborative sourcing space, a true partnership with long-lasting relationships. And believe me, they really are frank. They're really looking forward to become a major player in the US market. Any questions, buyers? If you want to get linked to any of these factories, please feel free to contact us. We have 4 factories, as Margaret mentioned, already in the show as exhibitors. Please look for them. These 4 factories are amazing. They have all these conditions, and they will be great partners to start do your sampling process and moving towards building long-term relationships. Thank you so much. Vance, back to you. Thank you.
Of course, Andres, and one of the things I was wondering here as you were talking, for any buyers that start to engage with you, that are coming to you to find the right partner throughout East Africa, what are some of those things that you'd want to share with everyone that's seeing this of what they should come to you with? I mean, I'm imagining some of the obvious ones, like it would be like tech packs, potential samples if they have them developed already, what their minimum orders were. So those are the first things that of course come to mind, but I'm curious, what makes your job the easiest and the I guess the fastest when you're working with the buyer, so you can get them up and running as quickly as possible?
Well, the first thing is their interest on inquiring about these factors. That's the first thing. Once we're connected, we can share, depending on what kind of product category they are looking for. They are looking kids, denim, wovens, and the next step is we will share with them the factory profiles of these pre-qualified industries in East Africa for them to review. to get their interest. We will absorb any questions regarding not only about their production capabilities, AQL quality standards, but also all the AGOA questions and the logistics involved to transport those goods to the market. So we will do that first initial relationship with us. And once they are interested on learning more about the factory, then we will link them directly with the top management of these factories. We'll introduce them. That's what we call the trade linkage. And they can discuss privately a business, because they will be dealing with the factory owners or the GMs or the marketing directors, so they can start building a relationship between a buyer and the factories on a private and confidential way.
Perfect. Okay, so that answers that there. So, and of course, Andres, thank you for you had all your contact information there on that slide. So, and you're welcome to turn off the screen share there as we go over to our next speaker here. And this actually again transition nicely as well. Through Andres, with all the information that you were sharing about Kenya and some of the information that was there, our next speaker here will be Jaswinder Betty. So he is the chairman of the Kenya Export Promotion and Branding Agency. And based upon some of the things that Andres was sharing, Jaswinder, I mean, I'm sure you'll be able to explain a little bit more and elaborate from your perspective some of the developments that Kenya has been implementing in their in the manufacturing capabilities. So Jaswinder, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chase, and good afternoon or good morning to all of you, depending on which time zone you're in. Yes, Kenya has been at the forefront for exporting apparel under AGOA, and I think we were the first country in the year 2000 when AGOA first started to sign on to the agreement. And year on year, our exports have been doubling. And of course, we've had some blips around 2005 with the expiry of the third country fabric, and then in 2007 with the global financial crisis. And we lost some sales, but by and large, last year's figures were $467 million. And of course, as you know, and from the chart that Andrea showed us, we are the largest exporter of apparel under AGOA to the US. Steve also talked about Kenya in negotiation right now with the US for an FTA. And yes, this morning I was in the meeting with the ministry in regards to the proposed FTA and how it's going to unfold. Yes, 5 years tomorrow will be the end of the current AGOA legislation, unless it's extended or depends what happens in the next administration in the US. I think a lot will shape up to tell us where we're going as a country. But as a country, we're very clear. We want to support and we want to move away the shocks that the US buyer has, or shocks in the sense that we've already seen two shocks that happened earlier this year. We, as a country, had a supply side shock, and that supply side shock came in February when our raw materials were injured and China couldn't ship out with China's lockdown, and we had some stock outs in our factory. And by the time we were up and running in March, the demand side had a shock, and that was our buyers in Europe and US had issues, and they were in a lockdown situation. So we've seen the both sides of the aisle, where the supply side can injure your business and also the demand side can injure your business. So we've been through all that. We've had situations where in March we had three-letter words or three-sentence answers that came from the buyers: do not cut, do not make, do not ship, obviously because they were in a lockdown situation. Since then, we've seen a rebound in the marketplace. Most of our factories are back up. I believe the large retailers or the buyers that we are working with in the US actually sheltered Africa from the massive shock of the market contraction. As you all know, the textile, apparel, and fashion pie was a $2.5 trillion pie, which contracted to 1.5 trillion, and right now it's up to 1.7 trillion. And I personally don't see a big expansion of that marketplace back to where it was. And that's because the consumer preference and the consumer behavior is changing. A lot of sustainability is being now questioned. We've seen what's happening in China with the supply chains being injured in China from that region where that forced labor situation is coming up, and I know large companies who also have presence in East Africa, in Mauritius, have been injured to almost zero sales because they were somehow connected with the raw material supplies that were coming from China, from that particular region. So the next phase of whole procurement is going to change phenomenally. What we have seen in Kenya, and I guess it's across the region, is that the online retailers have done really well. Anybody who had an e-commerce platform has done well. And anybody who was sitting on a bricks and mortar store has not done so well. And we've seen with the bankruptcies that we are seeing in the US with, Victoria's Secret, Brooks Brothers, Pennies, all these companies have had serious issues and viability issues, whether they will continue being in business or not. So obviously all that has been a big shock and a big learning curve to Kenya and to the Kenyan factories. We are also cognizant of the fact that in 2025, which is 5 years from now, not too far away, there will be another shock. And that other shock will be whether AGOA will be extended or not. And if it is not extended, of course, everything that we've built over 20 years will have to be questioned. And that for that reason, Kenya as a country, we're trying to give certainty to our buyers and tell them that if there is another shock that comes into procurement out of East Africa, maybe you'll be a little bit safer with Kenya with our negotiations if they proceed and they get concluded in a manner that the USTR would like us to work with. So a lot happening in the region. What is for sure is that we may not be able to rebound and rebounce back into a size of the pie which has already been injured because the consumer preferences are changing. Fast fashion, of course, is going to have its own toll. I think sustainable fashion is going to be the name of the new game. And in that sustainable fashion comes in slow fashion and products that maybe you don't need to buy every day, but you need to buy once in 3 days. So I actually see a backlash from the retail side into the factory space. At this point in time, factories are still up and running or trying to finish whatever orders they had. There's a lot of predatory buying that's going on, a lot of shocking that's going on, whereby it's pressure from the retailers back to the factories that this is the price that we want to buy at. And a lot of factories will not survive that predatory behavior that's ongoing right now. And I guess it's the pressure that's really coming from the consumer, because the consumers are looking for deals, and we are seeing a 70% reduction on retail prices, which is not heard of, and not it's never been used in the retail space, that it's going to carry on running for such a long period. For example, it started in March that we started seeing this discounts happening. So in my personal opinion, there's a lot of work to be done. Yes, East Africa is looking interesting, and yes, a lot of factories are thinking of relocating. We saw Japan offering $2 billion to their factories to offshore out of China and onshore into Japan. And I think there's a lot of business that's going to move west. And moving west, I mean, is moving west from China, Vietnam, maybe west into India, but definitely west into Africa, and definitely into East Africa, who is a little bit ahead when it comes to West Africa. So there's definitely there's an opportunity for buyers in the US to look at East Africa as the preferred sourcing destination. I know Ethiopia has done really well with marketing themselves, and a lot of investment has happened there. And yes, Tanzania, we've seen some growth in Tanzania, and we are seeing some verticality kicking in. I was told this morning that what used to take 35 days out of Hawassa to Mombasa is now taking 6 days, because the trucking is now functional, and that you can truck fabric made in Hawassa, send it to a factory in Mombasa, and it will be turned into a dress shirt for the US market. Similarly, we are seeing good examples out of Tanzania, where some fabric is getting made, sent to Nairobi into our zones there. And so there's a lot of regional cooperation. And I think Andres mentioned that Uganda's got beautiful cotton, and yes, it has beautiful cotton. And I have a facility in Uganda that I own, where we're doing everything from field to fashion, and not many value chains in the world running a field to fashion value chain. We have 16,000 farmers in the ground growing cotton for us, sustainable cotton made in Africa. And we gin, spin, knit, dye, finish, garment. And we're making t-shirts and we're exporting to Europe largely. Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, Tanzania will all do well with this new thinking by the US buyers of moving out of China and moving west, as they say, or going west. And we are open to business and we are building new parks. There is a whole sustainable supply chain that we're building around these new parks. We've got a textile park being constructed right now as I speak in a town called Naivasha, which is the end of the SGR. So we can actually rail and cargo from the port of Mombasa in 7 hours to this new park and back into Mombasa. And this park has got subsidized energy, it's got green energy, it's energy out of geothermal energy. So you'll start seeing a lot of sustainable stories that come out of Kenya, that this shirt is used making green energy. And all those are positive stories and positive investments that the government is encouraging. We've got this new artery logistics pipeline that we're trying to do. We know Africa's big challenge has been logistics, and I think that's a big challenge that we've seen in most of Africa. But if we can address those challenges and make East Africa and Kenya competitive, I think we are moving in the right direction. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions that the audience would like to ask, and I'm here to answer the questions. Let's make this more of an interactive session rather than a sales pitch. But yes, Kenya is open for business and looking forward to doing more business with the United States. I thank you.
I was wondering here, so in terms of like product categories coming out of Kenya, so for example, with all these countries that everyone on this call that they could be interacting with over the course of this 3 months here during Sourcing Magic Online, I guess, like, for example, in terms of product categories from particular regions, you'll see like Peru really pushes their alpaca because they're very known for alpaca. India is very well known for silks, and then the list goes on. So I'm curious for anyone who's going to be listening to this conversation, a few of those key product categories, whether it's a completed product or if we're talking fibers or textiles. For some of those key categories coming out of Kenya, what you would suggest for anyone who's listening to this, say, hey, if you're a buyer for XYZ product, make sure you have Kenya at the top of your list. I was wondering if you could share some of these.
Well, yeah. Basically, as you know, the U.S. import tariffs on apparel range between 16 to 32%. And Kenya's labor cost is a little bit higher than our neighborhood. And for that reason, we've seen a lot of product that Kenya is shipping out is moving into polyester space where the tariff advantage is 32%. So basically, for the buyer, the US buyer, for every $3 they spend, they can save $1 if they buy synthetic. So Kenya has actually, if you look at our export, a lot of it is moving into the synthetic place because we don't have enough cotton. We are importing cotton from Uganda and from Tanzania. And with that lack of cotton and the lack of verticality, and if our costs of labor are slightly higher than our neighborhood, although the productivity is also much higher. And actually, it's really on parity when it comes to the unit cost of production. But we've moved into a space where we're doing a lot of synthetics, a lot of polyesters, and that is in running apparel and all sorts of business that is significant to polyester. In my own Kenyan factory, where I have 1,100 people, I'm doing synthetics dress pants, and we do production for Kenneth Cole for the US market. So I have personally taken a view that all my cotton business will be out of Uganda because Uganda's got enough cotton, and all my polyester business will be out of Kenya because we need to import polyester, and we have a seaport in Kenya, and so it's easy for me to bring in the raw materials and actually turn them around. And I think that's really where this whole story is going, where you have a slightly higher cost base, you want to go into a higher tariff business, and that higher tariff business is polyester.
Excellent. And so the next question that I have here for you, we'll also have this apply to Goshu Nagash, who will be our next speaker. So he's from Ethiopia. We'll get to that introduction in a moment. But to wrap up here, Jaswinder, with you, in regards to Cbtpa, in terms of any of like the enterprise level buyers that are going to be seeing this, What are some of the things that they should take away with Cbtpa? Like if there's like trade missions or how they should interact with you to get the dialogue started with producing in Kenya. And then of course, Goshu will apply this to you as well as it pertains to Ethiopia. But just wonder, so all of the benefits and resources that they have available through Cbtpa.
Okay, let me just say that the Kenya Export Promotion and Branding Agency, Cbtpa, we look after all exports out of Kenya. So it's not primarily apparel and textiles. The Kenyan export book is about $6 billion, out of which $1.5 billion is tea, and $1.2 billion is floriculture and horticulture. So agribusiness is a very strong part of our business. That's almost $2.8 billion. Textile apparel is about, like I said, last year $467 million, and we lost $25 million in Q1, Q2, 2020 because of COVID, and there is a recovery that we can see. And I don't think we'll hit the same numbers, but we might be about maybe 10% lower than last year. I was expecting this number would be much bigger because of COVID, but we've seen a rebound in our exports, especially on those e-commerce platforms and sales to online platforms in the US. So as an entity, an export entity, what we do is connect the dots in every value chain, not only textile and apparel. And yes, if somebody is interested to buy apparel, we will connect him to the factories. And if somebody exporter is interested in exporting, we'll take him to the marketplace. And yes, we will participate in all sorts of market avenues that will take the exporter to the market and join the dots. And we will also be involved heavily in the negotiations of any market access agreement. As you know, right now, we have signatories to the Continental Free Trade Agreement, 1.2 billion people on the continent of Africa. Yes, the launch got delayed. It was supposed to be 1st July 2020. With the COVID, it got delayed to 1st January 2021. And we're all looking forward to this huge marketplace at our doorstep. Imagine a whole continent with 1.2 billion people, $3.1 trillion market size, and we will be duty-free selling into the continent of Africa. So exciting times ahead of us. And yes, we have a much broader mandate of export as opposed to looking at one value chain. And that one value chain is the subject matter of today. But that in that space, we are already excelling in a nice way compared to the rest of Africa. Thank you very much.
And thank you. So for everyone out there that may be looking to get in contact with Jaswinder and his team, you're able to directly. However, if you'd like us to assist the team with Sourcing Magic, we're able to help make introductions as needed. So Jaswinder, thank you very much. And this will lead us here to our next speaker, Goshu Nagash, who is the president of the Ethiopian Textile and Garment Exporters Association. So I have a couple questions that which we'll address with you here, Goshu, but if we could apply that same question over to you for some of the resources and benefits available through your association, and we'll go into some of the stories and case studies coming out of Ethiopia as well. So Goshu, please go ahead. Goshu, do we have a good connection over there with you?
I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of a problem with the connection, but I will try my best, to introduce myself, my sector, and then answer any questions that would be, raised by the participants or the viewers.
Perfect.
Is that okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. My name is Goshu Nagash. I am the president of the Ethiopian Textile and Garment Manufacturers Association. The Ethiopian Textile and Garment Manufacturers are in three groups. One is companies which are renowned, which have come from many countries and which are working in the industrial parks. The industrial parks, as Andreas has shown a little bit, are parks that are built by the government so that companies who are interested to invest in Ethiopia can come in with their machines and plug in and then start production without having the hassle, to build their own production facilities. So this is one group. The other group is foreign direct investors, which have built their own facilities in different parts of the country, and these are about 33. The first group are around 66 of them. The second group is around 33. And the third group is companies which are domestic investors, owned by domestic investors. And these companies makes up to around 200 companies which are in the export business. A little bit of a correction to the introduction. I'm not a president of the exporters, but the manufacturers, because there are some companies which are manufacturing textile and apparel, but are not exporting, local manufacturers also. So this is one thing. And as Andreas and Josh has been mentioning, Ethiopia has done a lot in attracting investors, which have very good market connection with the US and elsewhere. Companies like DBL, like Arvind, Velocity, which is making Vogue, and other big companies are now in operation. And the reason that Ethiopia has shown a leap in the export is that companies which have been in the establishment stage have come into, have started exporting. So these companies are only producing a very small part of their installed capacities, and we are going to see big leap in the coming period, like months and a year, assuming that the COVID impact will be improved somehow, because COVID has impacted negatively to every company over here in two ways. One is the source from China and elsewhere is hampered because of the COVID-19. On the other hand, there are order cancellations from the other end. So due to this, the figure that you have seen has shown 80% increase, is expected to increase to even greater percentage in the coming periods. Ethiopia, as you know, has its own cotton production. Up until now, we are using our own cotton. Although there are some shortages sometimes, which are complemented by imported cotton. Otherwise, we are self-sufficient in cotton, but we are importing the man-made fibers from Asia, definitely from China, India, and the other countries. The group of companies that are in both the industrial parks and outside the industrial parks have their origin is China, India, Bangladesh, and the like. So, Ethiopia in the near future is going to show a big leap in the export of apparel, because there are a lot of companies with big capacity, but has not yet used their capacity due to the time that they have taken in startup. On the other hand, we had some problems in logistics area. The government has a big commitment to resolve issues of logistics by having a good relation with international logistics companies, which are expected to come in and support our export endeavor. We are having also a rail system that have come into operation very short time ago, like in 6-8 months. So, these things taken together, we are expecting, the export performance to be bigger than even what we are seeing now. So, yes, the reason for this leap is the establishment of these companies, the coming of these new companies into the industrial parks and outside the industrial parks, which have a very good market connection to the US and to the other global markets.
For those that you may be able to share, what are a few of the brands and retailers that from the US that are currently sourcing in Ethiopia?
Look, H&M is there. Tesco is there, PVH is there, PCP is there, Children's Place is there. So there are a lot of retailers and brands in Ethiopia working now.
Excellent. And so for again, for everyone else to know here as well, that if you are exploring Ethiopia as a region for where you'd be sourcing, Goshu will be your contact to get connected to all of all the resources there in Ethiopia. I guess maybe one of the things that I asked Andres before for the information that he likes to gather from buyers before pointing them the right direction. Is there a few, if you can think of a couple takeaways that you'd want buyers to know that are coming to Ethiopia, what you'd want them to communicate to you beforehand so you can help them the most efficiently? Whether it's their production capacity, the types of categories they're looking for, anything that they should bring to you ahead of time.
Yeah, any company which is interested in sourcing from Ethiopia can contact us, and we will directly connect them to the specific manufacturers, so that they will have their own discussions and negotiations, so that there will not be any hindrance from any place. So we will connect them direct to the manufacturers. That will give them the confidence, to deal with the right producers of what product they want.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And again, for everyone out there, his information will be available as well. And again, if there's any introductions that you'd like the Sourcing Magic team to help with, that's what we're here for. And now I guess the way that I'd say that we're going to help bring this full circle here for our last speaker here, Pankaj Bedi. So we've addressed here with Stephen Lamarr from the buyer perspective from the U.S. and then Andres Saldias as being a liaison between the North American market and factories in East Africa, and then with Goshu Nagash and Jaswinder being these associations to connect with. We're going to wrap this up here with Pankaj, who is an exporter that is supplying to the U.S. market. So we're going to look at this from a private sector perspective. So Pankaj, I'll go ahead and bring you in here, and if you can share some of your experience supplying to the U.S. market and for other buyers that could be potentially working with you and other vendors in the area, some things that they should know about the operations available there. So Pankaj, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi everybody. This is Pankaj Bedi. I'm the founder and chairman of United RN EPZ in Nairobi, but we've been operating for last almost 30 years in UAE, Morocco, and other parts in the same sector, apparel textile sector. So we started manufacturing in Kenya, in Nairobi in 2002, so almost 18 years now. And primarily it was because of AGOA, and all our buyers are mainly American buyers. So that was our basic, idea to go there and work under AGOA, duty-free and quota-free, because at that time, even quota was a big issue. So under AGOA, then it became quota-free and duty-free. From the day one, we had the aspiration to be as per the buyer's need, including compliances, quality, and the 9 yards of the business. So we've been very fortunate that way, that being in Kenya, it had helped us, because even the worker skills and all that were already developed there, because the industry was there before. Almost 35 years back, the industry has been there. But what we did was we set up our own training institute also, which has trained almost 75,000 workers over the last 18 years, which we've worked, and almost we train 4,000 to 5,000 workers every year, which they can go and work independently also. And almost 75% are women out of that. So they can have, they can even work from home if they have to. So overall, Kenya, with the EPZ policy, export processing zone policy, it has, the ease of doing business has been there compared to the other African countries, and we even started our own export processing zone, and then a second company called Suman Shakti Apparels. The idea was to create product specific and buyer specific units, and we run like 5 units there now, with more than 10,000 workers, and all mainly exports are all to US only. We work for buyers like Levi's, Wrangler, Lee, JCPenney, Walmart, Kohl's, so all retailers also, Dollar General, retailers as well as brands. So as a product category, we do from bottoms, cotton bottoms to polyester bottoms to outerwear, t-shirt, innerwears, shirts, everything. So that way the skill is available in Kenya. Normally if you are a last speaker, everybody has already spoken everything. So it tends to become a little confusing what to say, what not to say. But I wanted to touch a point that, almost 15 years, I myself have been discussing with buyers to have an alternative sourcing strategy to Asia, not specifically to China, but to Asia, because my thinking was that eventually China, India, with their population and getting into middle class, they would be consuming most of the goods. And then eventually somebody has to supply to US. And this is something which US has been outsourcing for years and years now, But initially buyers were not so excited about Africa because they had this myth about Africa that, it will be very difficult to operate there and all those things. But I think over the years, buyers have started understanding Africa better. Last 4 or 5 years, I would say there are serious strategies, Africa-driven strategies by buyers like VF, which we work with, PVH, Children Place, Levi's, even H&M for their America market. So that sense of alternative sourcing apart from Asia has already started, coming in place, which is very good. And I hope more and more buyers realize that, the dependency on China, dependency on overall Asia in long term would not work. Maybe right now they might be cheap or the ecosystem is there, but till the time they will start investing into alternative sourcing in Africa, and especially in East Africa, which is already developed, how would they benefit out of it in long term? So sourcing is already changing, and in a way, if we can have investments from farm to fashions like we've been discussing, full integration, and not only integration in our sector, but integration of the region also. So like Tanzania is good in cotton, but Kenya is good in apparel manufacturing. Ethiopia is also good in cotton growing. They have good energy source, so they're cheap in energy, so they can do more textile. But like other countries are good in apparel manufacturing. So it's an internal trade also, can be boosted in a way. And then end of the day, the buyer will also have a better ecosystem in the region. We can source locally in the region and supply them, speed to market and everything.
So one of the ways that we've been, because what we're going to start wrapping up here shortly, one of the ways that we've kind of been closing these discussions has been, it's kind of a combination between whether it would be personal advice or business advice for all of the buyers out there that would be seeing this. And Pankaj, I mean, you've had a pretty fascinating career here in this role that you're in, where you're supplying and communicating with these major brands and retailers in the United States. Wondering if there's 2 or 3 pieces of wisdom that you'd share, whether this was things that you've gained personally or in your interaction with buyers that you've working with, or also in roles that you may have been in whenever you've been in buying positions for your vendors. Some things that you'd recommend any buyer out there to keep in mind, large or small, whenever they're sourcing in general, but maybe whenever they're sourcing specifically through Kenya and East Africa, just whatever those pieces of advice may be for anyone to keep in mind.
So my experience has been that, there have been buyers who have come very excited about Africa. They wanted to grow business and everything, but unfortunately they didn't choose the right partners maybe. And they were maybe overwhelmed and wanted to do too much. But there have been buyers like which we deal with. They have invested with the companies in a way that they have helped the companies to engineer their lines better, source better, have better logistic understanding, communication understanding, and all that. And those are the buyers which have been in the region for longer time now, and I'm sure they would benefit in long term also as the market sourcing is changing. So whoever is coming must come with a long term strategy, not just for the price that I can get a 5 cent, 10 cent cheaper. It cannot be for that, because eventually the minimum wage and all that will catch up with everybody. Today Ethiopia is cheaper than us, but their efficiency is also less than us. You see, so eventually by the time their efficiencies will go up, their salaries will also go up, and that will all play along. But main thing is it has to have a long-term regional strategy or country specific strategy by the buyers, and work with the vendors, like you had also mentioned. One from the speakers also mentioned that it has to be a partnership, kind of a vendor partner kind of relationship. You can't have a short-term opportunity, because in our sector, even if you're setting up a line, even if we have trained somebody and we're putting them on the line, they would start from a 25-30% efficiency, even though the buyer is expecting a cost of 65-70% efficiency, if you have to compete with Asia. So there is a long process to train, to get the efficiencies and all that. It's anything between 3 to 7 years, depending on where you are and how you are operating. So if they are also coming, they are also investing with their people. It has to be a long-term thinking, not short-term. Short-term will not work. We have seen many come, many go, but there are very good buyers also which have stayed.
Well, thank you. So, I mean, the long-term approach, that's one of the key takeaways here. And I think to go ahead and wrap this up here, I don't know if we're able to bring this back around here to Margaret and Stephen. I'm sure, I know, because everyone's doing a lot of things here with some multitasking and so forth. But Stephen, I'm wondering if I might be able to bring you back in here to see if you had any. Oh, Pankaj, you got one more thing?
Yeah, I just want to say, especially some, USAID, they've been always very supportive, because we started in 2002, and I think from 2003 onwards, we've got sponsorship for Magic and everything. They sponsor a lot of things in our sector, in Kenya also, and I'm sure in the region also. So we would want that to continue. And even though we have the free trade going on from a Kenyan perspective, which gives a lot of visibility to the buyers also and to us also as investors, I think AGOA still needs to be relooked for many countries, including Kenya, to be maybe given more another 5 years chance. Because right now, just after getting in 2015, after getting a 10-year horizon, investors got confidence. People started investing, and you've seen the growth. And before even the countries were also, the politicians were also, leaderships were also not connected that much to the idea that what kind of opportunity AGOA has got them, including creating jobs and forex and everything. So now more and more politics is becoming mature. More understanding is there. Countries are realizing that there's a need for job creation and forex creation and all that. They have identified apparel, textile as a number one. Like in Kenya, it's a number one sector for in the trade policy of Kenya as export-driven industrialization. So more and more leaders are realizing now in the region that this is a bright sector because of the education, skill, and other things which are lacking in the country. And this generation needs to be uplifted. The population is young, and in our sector, we have 70-75% women. They become the second earner in the family. So there are so many socio-economic benefits from the sector. But it's little late, but at least it started now. If that is supported now, with the continuity and investors, including buyers, also have this longer visibility under AGOA, I think it will do very good for Africa also, and in long term, it will serve the purpose for American buyers also. Thank you.
Of course, and I guess we'll take that and then bring this back over here to Stephen and factoring in some of these comments here. And the reason I kind of wanted to see if we could close here with Stephen is because he's in the position of everyone out there who's seeing this. So he's in the buyer role. So thinking the same way that many of you out there are thinking. So Stephen, based upon everything that's been said here from all of these different categories of individuals that have been speaking, I was wondering if you can help us wrap everything up here and just a few things that buyers should know as we close here talking about East Africa.
Well, I think first of all, thank you for holding this, and I think there should be more of these events because the appetite for hearing about Africa and developments for Africa is going to continue, especially as there are more developments that go on. It'll be very dynamic, so people will increasingly want to get very specific about specific programs, projects, case studies, supply chains, products, you name it. I think everything I would say has been just summed up by Pankaj beautifully, right? Not only commending USAID, but also talking about the long-term investment window and the need for AGOA to be part of that. And I'd say also the need for the free trade agreements to be part of that as well. So I definitely think there is a very bright future for many parts of Africa, including East Africa. And look forward to working with everybody to help execute on that.
Well, Stephen, thank you very much. And of course, to all the speakers out there, thank you everyone for being able to join us here today. Yes, Goshu, go ahead.
Can I come in? Can I come in for a moment? Yes. I failed to address one of Stephen's concern regarding the government partnership and commitment. He might have been aware of what is going on over here, but the government here is very much committed to the textile and apparel sector, and in assisting any buyer whenever they face any problem. So this is one very unique and important aspect that I was supposed to mention to address what Stefan was asking for, because yes, any buyer can be connected to the individual companies, but whenever there is a bump over the road, there is always a government body to come in and assist all the buyers who are interested to source from Ethiopia. I just want to mention this.
Goshu, thank you, and I'm very aware of that. In fact, several of my members, when they've talked about that concept of the good, the solid government partner, they've mentioned experiences in Ethiopia too. So, so we're on the same page.
Yeah, thank you.
On behalf of Sourcing It Magic, I really want to thank everybody on the panel. Really amazing information that you've been sharing. And I really think that buyers really need to take a look at Africa as a big supply chain, a big part of their supply chain. And I think all the information that you have given should really help them to make a decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.
Chase, if I may, can I share the link, the contact, so that anyone wanting to find out more information or contact any of the panelists, because we have their contacts, they'll be able to go ahead. Can I share my screen, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, question. Just 1 second, let me share.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah.
And then, Margaret, while you're pulling that up there, if there's anyone else that had any final remarks, Andres, I didn't know if you had anything that you wanted to leave anyone with as well.
Yes, absolutely. I think the information that was shared to the buyer is very crucial. But the takeaway it's very clear. Africa, it's a diamond that needs to be discovered by some buyers, already been discovered by others. But in my opinion, it's a diamond that has all the potential, the capabilities. It has the entire value chain in the region that needs to be further explored, and the conditions and the long-term vision are being created. And I think this event is very crucial for the buyers to understand that this is not a dream, this is not a forecast, this is already happening. And as trade linkage a consultant here based in the US, I am in contact with many buyers, and I have not received any rejection of learning more about East Africa and the continent as a whole. So great times are coming, and as COVID has shown us a lot of limitations and problems, but that has shown also a lot of opportunities, and African, I'm sure, is going to be taking those opportunities away. Thank you so much for the organizers, and this was just a great event for the buyers to see what the continent really has to offer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andreas, for the great work you have done. Thank you.
Perfect. And then for everyone out there, you'll be seeing this over the course of time, and then several different marketing pieces throughout Sourcing and Magic Online, whether it's through social media outlets, through email marketing, and so forth. And again, as mentioned before, however we can help connect the dots between the show and anyone that's seeing this, that's what we're here for. So again, to all the speakers, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Chase. Thank you very much for the very good work you have done. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Jace. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you to all of you for making time. And we look forward to doing this again sometime in the future. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much.